slavery was a choice. Now, not only was it a choice, but slavery was a trick. Now, let me explain what I'm talking about. Slavery had to be a choice because nobody was out there forcing the hands to do the work. You know what I'm saying? Them slaves had to decide to get up every day and be slaves. Some people not gonna understand that, but please just try to understand. What I'm saying is, you gotta choose not to fight. You gotta choose to see your loved one being tortured and not do nothing, right? So it was definitely a choice. You gotta choose. And then for years and years and years, it was a choice. But the thing is, not everybody, I don't even want to say that. I was gonna say not everybody chose it, because this is why I say it's a trick. It was a trick. Those people had to be tricked into believing that they were powerless, tricked into believing that even if they did fight back, it wouldn't work. And then by that trick being effective, by that trick working on them, then they effectively chose to be slaves because they decided that survival was better. They decided that they'd be better off just surviving, just not getting killed, just not getting beat, just not getting hurt, just not taking the repercussions of their actions. All to save a little. Nah, I can't say that because it's just so much bigger. It wasn't just a little pain. It was a lot of pain. That choice had to be made from the deepest part of them. And the thing is, some chose not to be slaves. Some chose not to accept it. But because most were convinced of that powerlessness, most were convinced that even if they did make an attack, it wouldn't solve the problem. And they were convinced that survival was the best option. And they were convinced or tricked that this was the only way they could survive, was by compliance or obedience. So they chose to comply. They chose to be obedient. They chose to do what they had to do to survive, to not get beat, to not get tortured, right? They believed that choice was the protection of their family. But it was a trick. It was a trick because when you believe that submission to unrighteousness, submission to evil is your route to happiness or righteousness or pleasure or anything that is not evil, you misunderstand the situation. See, they thought they were doing what's best for their families, but they didn't consider how far their family went. They didn't consider that if they decided to not fight and just submit to the evil, that the evil would grow stronger and bigger and become harder and harder to fight over time, right? They were tricked into believing that, okay, well, if we just go along to get along, we'd be all right. It didn't work. You go along to get along, and then your predecessors, or maybe, that's the wrong word, I think, but the generations that come after you, they pick up that consequence, right? So you may have survived for your time. At what level though, And then it's like, now your kids gotta just survive because of a choice you made? Nah. And they didn't. See, I believe that the stories we got were a little bit twisted in the sense of, we was told it was grown men deciding to be slaves, grown men deciding to say, oh, don't hit me, massa. But that's a finesse to keep us in a certain frame of mind. I personally believe more than anything, it was targeted at children. That trick to convince them that they were powerless, it was targeted at children. And the way they did that was killing the child's father in his face, disempowering a child's father in his face makes him believe that he has less power because his dad's got to be stronger than him. He's just a kid. His dad's a man, so his dad's got to be stronger than him. And if his dad can't handle it, then that'll tell the kid, I can't handle it. So then the kid will decide, well, if I'm going to survive, I better submit. That kid got tricked, right? Because let's say every person in that position to decide slavery or rebellion, If every person decided to rebel, what would happen? There would be war, chaos, torture, pain, right? But as long as they continued the fight, the result would be no slavery, whether that be because they were liberated or because they were all dead. You see what I'm saying? Now, let's take the opposite of that. If they all choose not to fight, what's the result? Torture, pain, all those things I just said a minute ago. But the difference is, because they chose not to fight, you still left with that slavery. There is no liberation. You still left with that position for your kids to do the same thing you just did. You know what I'm saying? And the thing about that, man, is if slavery was a choice, then that means there are options. You ever hear give me liberty or give me death? You ever hear before I live as a slave, I'll be dying on my throne? That's what I mean. The options, like, you gotta, I ain't gonna say that, but you got options. The option in that case, in such an extreme state of oppression, you know, up against such a great challenge, the option seems to be either submit or risk death, right? And that's the thing that's a big thing that helped them make that choice to be slaves, was the fear of death, the fear of the threat of death. A lot of people are afraid of death itself, but most people are afraid of the unknown. They're afraid that, oh, if I die, I don't know if it's gonna hurt. Or if I suffer, I don't know how long it's gonna hurt. Or what's gonna happen to my family if I die. Or, you know what I'm saying? It's all the unknowns that cause people to make quote unquote irrational decisions or emotional decisions or half-baked decisions or even, you know, completely logical decisions, honestly. But it's that fear of that unknown. It's that fear that not only do I not know if I'm gonna win, but I don't know how much pain, I don't know how much this is gonna cost me to try, so I'm not even gonna try in order to save myself some suffering. And it's a fear thing, but it comes, you're afraid when you believe in your inadequacy. Like, you're not afraid of the unknown if you believe in your ability to handle what is new. You know what I'm saying? So, like, them deciding that, or anybody deciding that I'll suffer instead of pursuing what is right just for the sake of, at least if I'm suffering, I'll know what I have, right? That's ignorant and honestly even arrogant. It's refusing to acknowledge the possibility of the unknown. Like, you have to believe that you definitely or are mostly sure that what you are afraid of will happen. And then that is the same as saying, I know the future. I know if I fight, I'll lose, right? That's a choice too. I mean, and part of it comes from training, part of it comes from the way you grow up, right? Nature and nurture make a person. But my point is, it's a people believe in their powerlessness because of a fear of the unknown. And the fact is, if you're willing to risk what you're afraid of, if you're willing to risk death, if you're willing to risk the thing that a person is trying to threaten you with, then they can no longer control you with that threat. And what is a person that's controlled, even by a threat? What is a person that's controlled? They're a slave, you know? So if we can remove that fear of that unknown, or remove that lie of powerlessness or delusion of powerlessness, because you could be powerless and gain more power, right? It takes a lack of knowledge or ignorance to believe that your power level that you at currently is the only one that you can possess. So a lot of things went into slavery, goes into slavery being a choice for a man, a woman, a child. But the thing is, man, regardless of how you feel about it or the emotional attachments you got to it and to the concept, you gotta choose. You gotta choose to be weak. You gotta choose not to risk your life. And most people do that due to a fear of the unknown.